So next we have several presenters, Maya Sánchez Velasco, Jorge Valiente Uriol, Gonzalo Valiente, Miguel Rodríguez Casellas from UTS, Grandeza Studio and Bajeza Studio. And they're going to have a presentation about which we're going to see a projection also during the break. And this video will be Teatro Della Terra Alienata, Australian Pavilion, winner of the 2019 Golden Bee Award, 22nd MilanoTriennale with Italian. Thank you. The floor is yours. We're going to see the video now?
No, not yet. No, just the presentation. Okay, now this, and then share with.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Maya Sánchez Velasco. He's Jorge Valiente Oriol, Gonzalo Valiente, and Miguel Rodríguez Casellas. Jorge, Gonzalo, and myself, well, the four of us are architects, educators, and researchers. Jorge, Gonzalo, and I founded Grandeza Studio in Madrid in 2011, and we have been collaborating with Miguel Bajeza since 2017, both in the teaching, in the research, and the creative practice. So, our work, to summarize it, briefly studies late capitalist spaces and narratives to identify through critical analysis and neutralize through political imagination the mechanisms that veil and normalize neoliberal violence. Today, I'm going to talk about Teatro Della Terra Alienata, that was the Australian pavilion at the 22nd Triennale di Milano in 2019, and that was awarded the Golden Bee Award to the best national contribution. The pavilion was looking at the Great Barrier Reef. It actually... you're not in the screen?
Yeah.
And the Zoom.
No.
Okay, so this is the important slide. It's good that we have it now. So the work, the Teatro Della Terra Alienata actually started in 2016 as part of a master studio that I was teaching at the University of Technology, Sydney, in the space of the master that was looking at the Great Barrier Reef after several consecutive bleaching events, as you know, 2016, 2017, and then after that in 2020. And trying to somehow interrogate what the Great Barrier Reef is beyond the idea, the imaginary of the pristine that we all have, right? And the World Heritage Site is somehow trying to crystallize. So we were looking at the kind of the different extractive industries operating in the area, but also at the research stations there in Heron Island. We had the capacity to go there and discuss with environmentalists, with scientists, with local Aboriginal elders, and somehow trying to unpack which are the complexities behind this kind of amazing ecosystem. And actually what we saw is that the Great Barrier Reef is actually articulated through a multiscalar network of infrastructural technologies of extraction that connect coal mines, monocultural sugarcane, all kind of extractive industries through roads, rails, and kind of networks of distribution with the rest of the world. But these technologies also operate in the scale of the body. These are what we call the arsenal of technologies that serve as the prosthetic to constantly monitor the reef, to kind of somehow constantly record its fate, right? And it's at the moment dramatic degradation. So the pavilion was somehow trying to engage with this technological layer. We were calling the technological layer the theater of destruction, because working with scientists from the School of Life Sciences at UTS, they were telling us that actually these technologies are not really effective in the long term, and considering the scale of the problem that the Great Barrier Reef is facing, that is linked to an economic system based on kind of unbridled growth, right? The capitalist system that somehow assumes that we have more than one Earth, So we were somehow flipping this front stage and backstage condition of the Great Barrier Reef, putting this backstage, technological backstage, in the forefront, and then on the backstage of the pavilion that we will see in a minute, using fiction to imagine an alternative fate for the Great Barrier Reef. So this is the pavilion. The pavilion, it was part of an international fair that was called Broken Nature, and how design takes on human survival. So we brought this pavilion to represent Australia, and as you can see, we're displaying this X-ray slash billboard with all the technologies of monitorization of the reef. It was also exhibited in the Netherlands afterwards. This is the version in the Netherlands. And in the backstage of this theater of destruction that we were calling, we were using fiction to construct an audiovisual collage of a supposed takeover of the Great Barrier Reef and the catchment areas by an international corporation driven by the ideals of the xenofeminist movement, right? So this was a provocation because we were alienating a fragment of Australia and somehow responding to the lack of action that the country is demonstrating against climate change. So we were imagining this fiction that was engaging with these different scales of the reef that I hope you can see in the coffee break when we will screen the video, and reimagining how these technologies could be sequestrated to instead imagine an economic system that would be based, instead of extraction, on joy, contemplation, and just the collaboration between the actors of the reef. So this is some of the images of the film in which we were somehow imagining this kind of alienation from the capitalist logics of the territory. These are, again, some of the collage was another visual collage that was mixing work of the students from these different master studios, but also the work, our work, creating new content, and the work of other artists involved that somehow contributed with their work in a very generous way, because they were open to kind of give their material and engage with this very destructive collage of mixing and hybridizing their work with our own production. So these are the artists, Chida Maydemir, Patricia Reed, that is herself as well one of the authors of the Xenofeminist Manifesto, Chauffeur Dertz, that was also involved in the filming and production of the movie, and also coming to the reef with me and the students, Mason Bycroft, Liam Benson, Janet Lores, also working on the reef for many years and looking at the reef as this environment in intensive care. And this is the award in Milan. We are currently this is a publication in which we were expanding some of the topics of this kind of reading of the Great Barrier Reef. We are currently working on a further publication that we continue unpacking, like which are these kind of interdisciplinary conversations that we were having with scientists, artists, etc. And the pavilion will be soon shown in Melbourne. It has been acquired by the National Gallery of Victoria to be part of the permanent collection of architecture and design. So hopefully you can see it there. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and an extra acknowledgement and thank you, because if you've noticed, they have kindly let us use the art as the program face, and congratulations on this great news about the permanent collection. Now, lots of questions, I assume. The microphone is going to Alex, maybe, who is closer to Maria.
One of the images that you showed on your X-ray was a diver with a camera. I was wondering why you consider that exploitation rather than a way of getting joy from the reef.
Maybe you wanna ask that again, maybe?
Yeah, no. I mean, I spoke of that. You can go. I can go.
Go for it, go for it, go for it.
So we are looking at the different. One of the claims of the project is that also the construction of the pristine and even the construction of the idea of nature is based on a relationship with it that is based on extraction, right? So the fascination of the reef as an object of desire belongs to a long history of exploitation of the environment. And so the consumption, even if joy implies also swimming and diving and enjoying it, we are somehow understanding the kind of also the interest, for example, of tourism industries in kind of maintaining the reef looking good, right? And they also have an impact, for example, in the current controversy around the World Heritage Site being part of the list of endangered environments from UNESCO. There was a lot of lobbying from the Australian government, and the kind of the tourist industry together with the mining industry were kind of putting pressure to remove the reef from the site. So somehow we didn't want to create the dichotomy between the extractive industries and then preservation and tourism, because what we want to say is that the question, in order to address climate change, needs to be much deeper and needs to be somehow understanding which are the logics of consumption and production that we are all, including the tourist industry, embedded in.
Can I say something? I think the project also, I will say that we engage into what we call intertextuality. So we unveil ideological content in different structures of language, including scientific and technological language that is not neutral, it is ideological. So the caption that each of these radiography has are also punchy. You know, when you look at them, there's an attraction there, oh, this is scientific. And then when you read the description, imitate scientific language, well, there's all kind of content and critique kind of embedded into it. So it's not a preachy project, but it's kind of like it's really intended to provoke, you know, a discussion about language in many different levels, not just politics against science, but how politics is embedded in scientific language.
Yeah, just very quickly, and I think that it's important that the diver outfits, if we associate it, for example, to a kind of heroic image of a scientist that is taking care of the reef and doing some practices, there is nothing problematic in that practice, but it's also being broadcasted mediatically as the solutionist approach that is taking care, that is dealing with a problem that actually we gather from, as Amaya was saying, no, from the commentaries of different scientists around us, that it was not enough, that it required, together with those actions, with those technologies that were involved in the caring, in the intensive caring of the Great Barrier Reef, another layer, a political action that is not being included. No? And we were wanting to highlight that those different objects put together, they're not as innocent as they could be seen if they are not going together with an accumulated concatenation of political actions and political transformations of the cultural context that surround directly and indirectly the Great Barrier Reef and its ecosystem performance.
That's the last comment, so that because otherwise I'm the one that doesn't tell me. No, but just a very quick comment about that arsenal of technologies is that it is also embedded in a political discussion that I'm sure all of you are very aware of, and that is related to the Great Barrier Reef Foundation. That is this foundation that without any competitive tender received almost $500 million from the federal government. And at the beginning of this project, we were starting to engage with them and trying to kind of get their attention so that we could have a conversation with them. And they basically told us that they would not fund or they would not participate in any action that was intended to address climate change. They said that in their webpage, and they basically redirect all these funds into universities or small research units that are only addressing the destruction of the Great Barrier Reef through technological local fixes. And these arsenal of technologies are basically almost like we are kind of redeploying or redrawing all of these technologies as a kind of as a technological and almost military apparatus. And we all are aware how the evolution of technology in relation to war evolves. And we were basically just putting together all the technologies that are, according to the conversations that we have been having with the scientists, unable to address actually the scale and the scope of the problem. No? And actually, that's what we call them a theater of destruction, because they tend to be used in front of the public opinion by the government to tell us that they are taking action, on climate change. But that actually, when you talk about scientists that are actually aware of the scope and the scale of the problem, they tell us, no, this is not true. This is just destructive technologies that are meant to solve certain things, but solve nothing in the end. No?
Yeah, just one brief question, maybe one answer.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you for doing what you're doing. It's amazing, and actually bringing up that the distraction that everything else. So I am a coral reef scientist, also not funded by the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, and the deputy director of One Tree Island research station. And so my question is like, what next? What is that you're going to do next? Are you keeping this campaign, or are you moving on to new endeavors?
I think that I mean, we are working in other projects in other regions now, in particular in the context of Pilbara. But I think that maybe the space of the classroom and the pedagogies with the students, and somehow building up the critical thinking and a modus operandi that somehow spreads a suspicion around technocratic discourses, and somehow I think that this is maybe the most effective way to go beyond our kind of patrimony, we call it, like our own group of four, to constantly keep the conversation going. So it could be the reef. The reef here is very dramatic due to its scale and the kind of the dramatic vanishing of the colors and all these things that we know. But I think that it goes beyond that, and yeah, we'll continue working on it.
Thank you very much.